4 scary stories about camping. Story 1. The campsite that didn't match the records. I didn't plan to stay out late that day, but I ended up arriving at the campground just before sunset. It was one of those public forest sites that looked official enough on maps, with numbered spots and a small wooden sign at the entrance. There was a paperboard near the parking area showing which spots were available. I remember checking it twice because something about it didn't feel consistent. Spot 7 was listed as empty. That's the one I chose. The walk to it took longer than expected. The paths weren't clearly marked, and I had to rely on faded tape tied around trees to stay on track. When I finally reached the spot, the first thing I noticed wasn't the trees or the clearing. It was the fire ring. It already had ash in it, not old, scattered ash. It looked compact, like it had been used recently and then left undisturbed. I checked my phone again, thinking I might have made a mistake, but the map still showed the site as unused. I set up my tent anyway. The forest around me didn't feel especially deep or remote, but it was strangely quiet. No birds, no wind moving through branches, just still air. At first, I thought it was just one of those quiet evenings in nature people talk about, but the silence didn't shift. It stayed fixed. Around nightfall, I started noticing small inconsistencies, things I couldn't fully confirm, like sounds that stopped the moment I tried to focus on them, or movement in my peripheral vision that disappeared when I turned my head. Nothing concrete, just enough to make me aware of my surroundings in a way that wasn't comfortable. Later that night, I stepped out of my tent to check the fire ring again. The ash looked different, not replaced, just disturbed. Slightly flattened in one section like something had stepped through it. There were no footprints leading in or out. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed something else. The path I had used to get there didn't look the same anymore. It wasn't blocked or gone. It was just visually unfamiliar, like I couldn't match it to how I remembered arriving. I went back into my tent. Sometime after midnight, I woke up without knowing why. No noise, no disturbance, just awake. The inside of the tent felt subtly different, not physically changed, just harder to orient myself in, like I couldn't immediately tell which direction I was facing. Then I noticed the zipper. It was slightly open, not fully, just a few centimeters, enough to let in a thin line of colder air. I don't remember opening it before sleeping. I stayed completely still. Nothing moved outside. No footsteps. No rustling, just that opening unmoving as if it had been left that way intentionally. I never saw anyone outside. But in the morning when I packed up, the fire ring had fresh ash in it again, like it had been used after I went to sleep. Story 2. The trail that never changed. I was hiking alone on a loop, trail that was supposed to take about 3 hours to complete. The path was clearly marked at the start, and I made sure to follow the signs carefully because the forest was large and had multiple branching routes. The first hour was normal. Then I started noticing repetition, not dramatic repetition, small things. A broken tree branch shaped like a hook, a patch of rocks in a triangle formation, a tree with bark stripped in a vertical line. I remember thinking, I might just be seeing similar patterns in a forest that naturally repeats itself. But after the third time I saw the same rock formation, I stopped trying to rationalize it. I checked my distance on my phone. The trail was still progressing normally according to GPS, so I kept going. At one point, I passed a bench carved into the side of the trail. I distinctly remembered seeing it earlier. Same scratches on the wood, same tilt in the seat. That was the first moment I felt genuinely unsure of whether I was moving forward at all. I tried to speed up. The trail didn't change. I slowed down. Still the same. Eventually, I started focusing less on the surroundings and more on trying to reach a clear point ahead, something I could use as a reference. But every time I thought I was approaching something new, it turned out to be something I had already passed. I stopped for a while to listen. The forest was quiet, but not empty. There's a difference. It felt like there was activity just outside of what I could register clearly. After a while, I decided to turn back, but when I turned around, the trail behind me didn't look like a return path. It looked identical to what was ahead. Same trees, same light, same spacing. I picked a direction and kept walking. At some point, I realized I wasn't checking anymore whether I was making progress, because there was nothing to measure it against. No landmarks that felt reliable, just repetition with slight variation. Eventually, I stopped entirely and stood still. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. My footsteps in the dirt weren't just going forward. They were overlapping, layered, like I had been walking the same section more than once without realizing it. And even though I wasn't moving anymore, the forest didn't feel like it had stopped adjusting around me. Story 3: The fire that should have gone out. We were camping as a group in a fairly remote forest area. Nothing extreme, just far enough that there was no cell signal and no nearby roads. We set up camp near a clearing that already had a stone fire ring. We used it the first night without issue. Everything felt normal. We talked, cooked, stayed up late. Around 2 a.m., we decided to put the fire out and sleep. We followed standard procedure: water, dirt, stirring the ashes until everything was cold. We were careful about it because the forest was dry. Then we went into our tents. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up. There was light outside. At first, I assumed someone was up early, but when I stepped out of the tent, I saw the fire burning again. Same location, same size. No one was near it. I checked the others. Everyone was still inside their tents. No movement, no conversation. We all came out one by one when we noticed it. Nobody had restarted it. We agreed to put it out again, assuming maybe we hadn't fully extinguished it. So we did it more thoroughly this time. We made sure it was completely dead cold, soaked, buried. Then we stayed up longer, watching it together until we were certain nothing remained. We went to sleep again. And again, I woke up to light. The fire was back, but this time it didn't look like a normal campfire. There was no visible fuel source. No logs, no structure. Just a concentrated burn sitting directly on the ground, as if the fire itself had a fixed location rather than something it was consuming. No one spoke for a long time, because there wasn't an explanation that made sense anymore. We didn't try to extinguish it again. Instead, we just watched it. Eventually, it began to weaken on its own. Not going out suddenly, just fading slowly like it was finishing something. When it finally stopped completely, we checked the ashes carefully. There were no marks left behind. No message. No symbol. Just a circular burn pattern that matched the exact shape of the fire ring. Perfectly centered, like it had never changed at all. Story 4. I went camping alone for a weekend to clear my head. Nothing extreme. Just a forest campsite a couple hours outside the city. It had marked trails, a parking area, and a few other campers spread out far enough that you could barely hear them. The first evening was normal. I set up my tent, made a small fire, and stayed up listening to the forest settle into night. That's the thing about camping, the sound changes slowly. Birds fade out, wind gets quieter. Even your own movements start to feel louder than they should. Around 11 p.m., I noticed something odd. Not a sound at first, more like a pattern missing. The forest had gone too quiet in one direction, like someone had turned down the volume in a straight line through the trees. I remember thinking that was strange, but I didn't really take it seriously. Then I heard something. A snapping branch. Not close, but not far either. Just inside the edge of the trees beyond my firelight. I turned my flashlight toward it. Nothing. A few minutes passed. Then again, another sound. Like something shifting weight between branches or stepping carefully over dry leaves. Still nothing visible. At that point, I assumed it was probably an animal. Deer, maybe. But the sounds didn't move away like animals usually do. They stayed in roughly the same area, watching distance. I tried to ignore it and went back to sitting by the fire. That's when I heard something much clearer. Not movement this time, a low sound, almost like something brushing against itself, like fabric dragging slowly across bark. I remember stopping mid-motion and just listening. The fire was the only light I had, and anything beyond it was just darkness between tree trunks. Then I saw it, not clearly at first, just a shape that didn't match the trees. Too still, too vertical. It wasn't standing in the open. It was partially behind a tree, just far enough that the firelight didn't fully reach it. I thought maybe it was another camper, but something about the outline didn't feel right. It didn't shift its weight. It didn't adjust. It just stayed. I waited. Nothing happened. No movement. No sound. So I convinced myself I was imagining it and looked away. When I looked back a minute later, it was gone. That should have been the end of it, but the sounds didn't stop. They actually got closer. Not fast, not rushing, just gradually shifting through the trees around my campsite, always just outside the light. At some point, I started feeling like I was being slowly surrounded, not all at once, just one side at a time becoming active, while the rest stayed silent. I checked my phone. No signal. Battery was fine, but useless out there. I stayed by the fire longer than I planned. Eventually, I decided to go inside the tent and sleep it off, but I didn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear something outside, a soft step, then stillness, then another step from a slightly different direction. It felt like whatever it was walking around the perimeter of my campsite, not entering, just circling. At some point during the night, I woke up suddenly. No noise had triggered it, just that feeling you get when something in your environment changes and your brain notices before you do. The fire was almost out, just glowing embers. That's when I saw it properly. Between two trees at the edge of the clearing, a figure, completely black in shape, but not like a shadow cast by something. It didn't behave like a shadow. It had depth. It blocked what little light was behind it instead of blending into it. And it wasn't still in the natural sense. It was too still, like it didn't understand movement the way living things do. I froze inside the tent. I didn't move the flashlight. I didn't breathe properly. It didn't react immediately. It just stood there, facing the campsite, not looking around, not searching, like it already knew exactly where I was. Then it moved, not walking, more like a shift forward that didn't match how legs are supposed to work. No sound of footsteps, no snapping branches, just distance closing where there shouldn't have been movement. That's when I made a decision I still don't fully remember clearly. I got out of the tent, grabbed my flashlight, keys, and everything I could carry without thinking. The moment I stepped out, the figure didn't rush me. It just adjusted, like it had been waiting for that exact moment. I didn't stay to understand it. I ran. I didn't try to be quiet anymore. Branches hit my arms, the ground was uneven, I kept losing balance, but I could hear it behind me. Not chasing in a sprint, just following at the same steady pace I had seen before. Always close enough that I knew it was still there. Never close enough to see clearly again. The only thing guiding me was the direction I remembered the parking area being in. Eventually, I saw my car through the trees, just a shape at first, then headlights reflecting faintly. I ran harder at that point. I didn't look back. I reached the sea. I reached the car, fumbled with the door, got inside, and locked it immediately. For a few seconds, I just sat there trying to breathe. The forest outside was completely dark now. No movement, no sound, just stillness again. I turned the engine on and didn't hesitate. As I pulled out, I finally looked into the rearview mirror. The trees behind me were empty. No shape, no movement, nothing following. Just the road disappearing into darkness behind the car. But as I kept driving, I noticed something that didn't make sense. My flashlight was still on the passenger seat, and it was pointing at the window. And for a split second before I turned it off, it looked like something outside the car was still keeping pace, just beyond the edge of the light.